Hi everyone, this is Ava from Soul GPS. Welcome to my channel. In today's episode, we're going to look at the spectrum of narcissistic mothers. A lot of the examples that I'm going to be using are from the point of view of a daughter of a narcissistic mother, as that is kind of the pool of my knowledge, so to speak. I know quite a few women, who have experienced some of the things that I will be talking about. However, wherever I can, I am going to include examples of men as well, as there are plenty of those too. So if you are a man and you're watching this video and you worry about whether this video will be relatable to you, just I'd encourage you to stick around, give it a chance and see, because I think there might be quite a few parallels, a bit of similarities, and so it will be relatable to you as well. Because as children, it really does not matter whether we are, a boy or a girl. If our mother is narcissistic, we are going to suffer in very similar ways, and it is going to affect our development. So I'm going to open this video by talking about the whole idea of a taboo of looking at a mother as, a source of something negative. Because regardless of what religion you are, regardless of what culture you're from, I've traveled to so many countries and across all different continents. And it's everywhere it's the same thing, the mother is worshipped. And I think that's a beautiful thing, but we also have to be very careful, because it is going to, it makes the trauma, the transgenerational trauma and bad behavior continue on and on and on and on, and makes people unconscious and makes it more difficult for people who have been affected by narcissism and their mother-daughter, mother-son relationship to acknowledge it, and to and instead these women and men are just plagued with so much guilt and a sense of deep obligation and feeling like, and shame, feeling like they shouldn't be saying anything because the family is supposed to be kept sacred, and you don't talk about these things, you don't talk about these secrets. And unfortunately, trauma and these kinds of shadowy emotions that then can rob us of the joy of life survive in the dark. They thrive when we don't talk about it. They thrive in ignorance. So this conversation is really important, but I also want to acknowledge the fact that it's a very difficult conversation for many, for the mothers, for the daughters. It challenges the status quo in so many ways, but I think it needs to be aired out. So here I am. I want to talk about it today. So the problem with experiencing narcissism from a mother is that you will feel oftentimes unloved, unacknowledged. It's really difficult to share your experience, because narcissists, and especially narcissistic mothers, can be very, very good at creating the perfect facade, the perfect image of the family for everybody outside looking in. So the idea of something really bad going on the inside can seem almost like incomprehensible for someone to hear, especially when it comes from a child, and as children, it's just again, so difficult to get any sort of acknowledgement for many reasons. One is that the mother can create a very difficult barrier to penetrate. And number two, it's because, as children, we don't feel like maybe we have the competence or, the ability to state our needs and understand what's really going on in a way that makes other people receptive and respect that. So respect our young voice. So I just want to put that out there, because there's so many men and women that are suffering in silence. Some I hear from who are in their 70s, some whose mothers are in their last years of life, and they are still tormenting them with guilt, and they're on their deathbed, and they're still treating them like doormats and just acting horribly, and in so many cases it just gets worse and worse over time. So yeah, lots of invisible wounds, that I really do want to acknowledge here, because when you grow up in a narcissistic family that has toxic dynamics, oftentimes what happens is the things that you cannot see, right, that are the most painful and leave the most most of the CPTSD residue, CPTSD, which stands for complex post-traumatic stress disorder or response, as Richard Grannon has been saying, which I love that reframe. It's a learned response, which we can then change to be positive. And we'll talk about this later in this video. That's really what this channel is about too, is, learning to take the lead that you've been dished out and turn it into gold. So the invisible wounds, right? So difficult to live with those wounds because you can't quite pinpoint what happened. It could be a string of very little but repetitive compounding events in your life that have made you continually invalidated, have silenced you, has made you feel like there's something wrong with you, right? The bottom line, something's wrong with me here, that I'm somehow faulty, I'm somehow damaged. That is the message you get from growing up in these dysfunctional families, and you can't even think for yourself because you can be over-reliant on the opinion of others, and you suffer in silence. And sometimes you don't even admit it to yourself. So there's a spectrum. There's a spectrum of mothering that I want to explore here. On one end, we're looking at severely neglectful, narcissistic mother that I would compare to like an overt type of a partner, that you would meet. Somebody who's just it's just so easy to tell, right? That there's something's wrong. At least it's easier to tell. It's much more. It's out there. Whereas the other side of the spectrum, we're looking at the enmeshing mother that can seem like the perfect mom. She's so close to you. You guys are so entwined together. And so she's more of the covert type that is going to be controlling you with pity and with guilt. So we'll look at that too. But starting out, we're going to look at the severe narcissistic overt mother. So this kind of mother is going to make you feel unloved because she is so absorbed with herself, with making herself seem so important, so exceptional, and completely blameless that there's no room for anything else. That is literally her whole world. It's always about, what do I look like? How do people perceive me? How much supply can I get from both my daughters and my sons? And the only reason, the only way you can feel close to a mother like that is if you become one of her fans, right? One of her cheerleaders, the person who's going to be, at her feet worshiping her. Very, very destructive for a child who has his and her needs to be met, and there's never time for that, right? Yes, it could be a wealthy home. Yes, it could be materially very sound. Things can be provided for, but if you don't have that emotional warmth, it's like being starved. So so she's completely self-absorbed and always seeking attention. I think that these mothers often are comorbid with histrionic personality disorder. Something to look at if you can resonate with this kind of a description I'm giving you right now is histrionic personality disorder. This is the kind of a person who always has to be in the center of attention. Life for her is a stage, it's a spectacle, and she always has to be the star. So mothers like that can actually sort of fool you in a way by bringing up their young kids and showing them off to their friends and telling you, look at what I have produced, right? This is my pride and joy. And then when the kid is, not only maybe they don't want to, maybe you didn't want to do that, maybe you didn't want to be put, center stage and paraded around. And then when you're done, you're like kind of shushed aside, and it's back to her being the star. But it's like she will take credit for your accomplishments. She will take credit for this. And it can be very damaging for boys, because then the boys are learning that this is the only way to be out there in the world, is to always show off, is to always be, the kind of a man that she expects him to be. He can't be fully himself. And God forbid when a child like this grows up, right? You hit the teenage years, maybe you even remember, I had the best mom, right? She was all that, she was fun, there was always a lot of people around her, always a lot of noise, there was always entertainment. And then you grew up, and then you became a little woman, right? And then what? Then she begins to compete with you. And it turns really nasty. It can just devolve very quickly. This kind of mother is going to show you also how much burden you are to her, right? Again, the self-absorption here takes the upper hand, And she will tell you, how much money it costs her to raise you, how much you're draining her, because she just never has time for herself and this and that, which is contrary to her lifestyle, but she's going to tell you that to guilt you. And there's this kind of a dynamic I find with overt narcissistic mothers, is that they want to push you away from the nest, right? They want you out as soon as possible. They want you to grow up, and without giving you the proper tools to then go out into the world and succeed, right? That's something I'm going to talk about in a second. You get something else instead. But whereas the other mothers, the enmeshing mothers, they're the opposite. They want to keep you in. They always want to have you tied on a string, and God forbid you leave them, right? Because they will feel so abandoned and so on. So she will reward your codependency. This kind of mother, she wants to feel needed, and yet at the same time, she's going to push you away when you need too much. But she does not want you to be too independent either, because then there is the threat of you being, not needing her. It's a pretty sick dynamic. But if you admire her, that's just the best kind of supply you can give to her. And then in the event there is any form of a conflict, because we are dealing here with lots of lying, lots of pathological lying, gaslighting, and denial. So if she says something to you that is, that's putting you down, criticisms. I made a whole video about criticisms. Yes, it dealt more with the partner dynamic in that video, but it can also apply here easily. These little criticisms that how you look, and how, this dress makes you look bad, and how your hair is all messed up, and how this, it can be body shaming. It could be emotional, about, say, you're sensitive about something because you felt that there was injustice at school or with your friends, and she'll not acknowledge your emotions. She'll say you're just, you shouldn't. There's no room for you to fully express yourself, basically, because the moment you take up too much space, you're threatening her. So she will always try to shush you out, and she will not acknowledge when she hurts you. She will say things like, "I never said that. You have a vivid imagination." I got a lot of that in my life, lots of vivid imagination, which I do. I think all kids do. But when you feel continually invalidated, eventually it's going to wear you down. So there's going to be a lot of that in those, in narcissistic mothers on both sides of the spectrum. And after, you reach that competitive level with her, when you begin to, turn into either an independent boy or a teenage girl who's now, has her own life going on, she will start to tear you down so she can keep building herself up. Again, this woman has to always be on top. She will hang out with your friends. She'll try to take over your groups. She's the kind of woman who always want to be perpetually young, right? She will also triangulate between siblings. Triangulation is incredibly toxic, especially amongst family, because back in the day when we had tribes, when we had clans, when there was more open communication, not so much we were all lost in our phones. What I think the family can provide for, which is really healthy, is reality check. When you have a lot of points of view and all the nodes are communicating with each other, you arrive at a much more grounded version of the truth. Versus when all of those channels get cut off, which is what narcissistic mothers will do. She will whisper one thing to this child, another thing to this child, set them against each other, create conflict, and look back and enjoy the spectacle that she has just created, right? The drama. But of course, if you try to confront her about it, no, she's never done that. She's the saint. It's you, or it's her, and it's this. It's always, blame shifting, guilt tripping everybody else around her. It's never about her. As long as, unless she's the center of attention, it's all about her. But that's what the triangulation does. I find that that's one of the reasons for this tremendous toxicity, is that it is not until later in life, if, you've been able to dig in for the truth and figure out what really happened. And then you can confirm your stories with the stories of your brothers or sisters or cousins, the larger the better. And then you'll be able to maybe see a much better picture. Of course, that picture is going to be tainted if the other people have become their flying monkeys, meaning that they have bought into their version of reality and their version of the story, in which case the conflict only mounts. And that is unfortunately the average dynamic of the average family these days, is that it's more or less divided. And usually if there's more more dysfunction and less sanity, because being the outspoken, sane person costs you so much. It costs you basically banishment, right? Which is encoded in our genes as the worst form of punishment, because when you're outside of the clan, when you've been pushed away from the tribe, you're out there lonely, and therefore you can be threatened by the wolves, by the wildebeest, and all sorts of other threatening predators. Which is why loneliness also can feel so devastating to us sometimes, is because we feel threatened and exposed. Another topic for another video, for another course actually I'm working on. So what else is she going to do? You know, you'll never feel heard or seen or be able to succeed, right? Succeed due to guilt and shame. So you're going to be trapped between the two, shame and guilt. If you don't do enough, you're going to be ashamed. If you do too much, you're going to feel guilty that you just outdid her, and she will make you feel that way for sure. For sure. So, you know, so many stories I've heard of young daughters being very successful only to find that their success threatened their relationship with their daughter. And then she wasn't able to, experience the full expression of the full harvest of her success, because she had to choose between that and her mother. And if she didn't know who she was dealing with, then it's much easier to make the decision of, going back to the toxic mother, because again, mothers need to be revered, and don't you ever dare, separate yourself from it. So she'll give you that really conflicting message. On one hand, just like, when we're talking about showing her kids off, she'll brag about you and tell you how proud she is of you, but you can't outshine her. It's like the first of the 48 laws of power that Robert Greene has written, which is kind of like a manual for narcissists. Rule number 1, never outshine the master, right? But here, we're not talking about the king. We're not talking about the boss. We're talking about the mother that is supposed to be the source of the sustenance. So very, very, very difficult to have that, to be a recipient of that. So before we go into the other side of the spectrum, look at the enmeshing mother, the covert mother, I just want to say that there's also, we can drive further into the spectrum of the severely narcissistic mother, looking at sadistic mothers, who lock up their kids in the room, they keep them prisoner, they watch them being raped, they are alcoholics, completely neglectful, they let the street raise their children, they completely don't care what happens to them, tremendous deep level of abandonment, or have their, their new husbands, the stepfathers of their children, sexually abuse them, or a bunch of drug addicts come to the home and just kind of take over. It's like, it's not an environment to raise a child. There's so many children so many families that don't deserve to raise kids, in my frank opinion. And because you need to have a very safe environment. You got to be safe and secure within yourself first before you do it. And unfortunately, the result of that is that, we're dealing with the epidemic that we're dealing with, where people are, searching for themselves. They have been, shattered inside because they haven't received the sustenance, the love, the compassion, the protection that they really deserve, that they needed as children by the virtue of being born. All right, so now pivoting over to the other side of the spectrum, the enmeshed mother, the more covert mom. And I want to begin by giving you a quote from a fantastic book that I really recommend you check out, called Mothers Who Can't Love by Susan Forward. I will put the description below this video. And Susan Forward writes, "Enmeshers place the burden of their happiness on you. And instead of teaching you to build a life of your own, they snap on the emotional handcuffs and never let you go." That is the case with emotional mothers. They can seem like they're just perfect, right? They're always there. They're always taking care of their kids. But it can be so much so that it will make us perpetual kids. She will never allow you to grow up. If you're a man, you'll always be stuck between this kind of half man, half child, woman, half child, half woman, right? These kinds of people, these children are, they are emotionally stunted in so many ways, because they have been imprinted with the message that it's not safe outside of the home, that it's always better to be here, to be with the mom. And it's a form of training, it's a form of codependency training, which doesn't allow the kid to go out there and really learn the skills of survival and of being assertive in order to then succeed and their independence being supported instead of them being punished for trying to be self-sufficient. This can be, I think, extremely damaging for men, especially boys, because a lot of the enmeshing mothers, I find, there's a borderline component here too. The fear of abandonment, the wanting to pour all of her love, all of her attention into the kids and make them the center of her world. And oftentimes what happens is her relationship with the father of the kids is not very good. So not always, but often. So the father is then gone most of the time. He neglects the kids. He neglects her, especially. He neglects her. She will turn him into a monster in the boy's eyes, right? And the boy is then going to take over the burden of the dad who's not present. So he's going to have to grow up very, very quickly, and he will be rewarded by being there for his mommy. He will essentially become her surrogate husband. It's something that's called parentification. Look it up. I have met with quite a bit of that in my life and in my coaching practice. So it's quite common, and it then, unfortunately, it creates really sensitive, open-hearted, giving men. But the problem is that their boundaries are very permeable, and also there is not enough of a give and take in the relationship, and they will just work themselves to the bone to satisfy the woman, because that's what they did for the mom. So they take that outside of the relationship with the mom, and they're going to continue that dynamic in his romantic relationship. And the problem with that is that it's very easy then for narcissists, sociopaths, psychopaths, other borderline women to be attracted to that kind of man and then destroy them. And they will feel this really deep hurt inside, because they will feel like, you know what, I'm doing everything I can. I'm being the best version of the man that I can. My mom raised me with the right values, and yet I keep getting my ass kicked. Why? This is why. So, yeah, so again, she may think that this enmeshing mother may think in her mind that she's doing the right thing, but she's not. She is suffocating her children. Some psychosomatic symptoms, asthma here, allergic reactions, hives, what else is that? Eczema, like all of these hypersensitivity this can cause, because the child doesn't have any room, any space to open up and grow. They feel like this is the only way. There's, again, this reward and punishment. It happens on both sides of the spectrum. Anytime we deal with narcissists, there's reward and punishment. This is the form of molding. But instead of looking at what adults do to each other, now we're looking at a child, right? So a child is kind of like it's more or less blank, not completely. I think we do come into this world with certain preset information, but for the most part, we're super highly programmable. Our brains are very neuroplastic. So wherever we end up is where we end up, and we're gonna soak that up, and we will take that as that's the way it is, right? That's the first instruction manual. So. So this is these are some of the symptoms, if you recognize them within yourself, that you may have had an enmeshing mother. She could also flip things around and become the kid, as they get older, looking for many reasons for you to mother her. So she may invent diseases. She will make you lie and cover for her, stand up for her in certain situations. She will make you ignore your feelings and your intuition and instead trust her own. So this is a big one. This is a very bad form of training where you doubt how you feel. And that comes a lot through gaslighting. You're trying to validate your reality. She's going to deny. She said, this never happened. I never said that. I never did that. You imagined all of this. And then this will cut you off from your intuition. So as you get older, it will be much difficult for you to navigate the world in a way that resonates with your deep self, deep core. She will compete with you when you need care. So like with the other mother, remember, she would compete with you for looks, for status, for what you represent. In this case, it's like if you're ill, she's going to be more ill. If you just had a surgery, she's going to get the flu suddenly. So she always has to be slightly worse off than you, so that you really pity her and you have that sense of guilt. So always that heavy sense of guilt around these mothers. She'll invent dramas, of course, overinflate everything. Situations from families will always be overinflated. There'll be all these enemies that may not actually be enemies, but she will make you think that they are because of how she perceives them. Everybody's always a threat. She also used that to isolate you from other people. Just something to keep in mind. It's a way for her to entrap you and make you feel like you're better off with her than without her. Again, everybody's an enemy. Being with her is you're in the safe harbor. She may go as far as teaching you, and maybe not even directly, more subconsciously, that men are bad and you should avoid trying to have a relationship with them because they're all just horrible. That is because her relationship was bad, or her relationships were bad. So that's your first modeling, right? So again, this is a covert way and kind of sneaky way. I don't know if all of them are conscious of doing this, but this can teach you, make you believe, if you're a woman, that men out there are bad. So you should stay with her. So it's kind of like grooming you to become her caretaker, if that makes sense. So be careful with that. And then, so, and also one thing I would really advise you to consider is, or encourage you to consider, is to take advice from people whom you admire and who themselves exemplify high level of living. High level of self-development. It's kind of like going to a doctor's office and the doctor looks really unhealthy. Are you going to take their advice, right? Or same with her. If she had really shitty relationships most of her life and now she's going to give you advice on your relationship, I wouldn't take it. Or you may want to let her talk, but not take it in. So, or if you do get married and you do have your children, this kind of mother is always going to try to poke her nose in and tell you, again, how you should raise your kid. What should you tell your this? She might even encourage you to lie and misconstrue reality. I've seen that a lot. Like you do something and you feel bad about it and you want to tell your husband about it. You want to tell your partner, she's going to tell you, no, don't do it. And then it comes out, because you listened to her, and instead of you having followed your own hunches and been straight up with people and built your integrity, you followed her, you lied because she said that's the safer thing to do, and now you have a much bigger problem on your hands, right? So lots of examples here. What else? Yeah, and if you refuse her advice, what you may encounter is the pouts, and again, the guilt tripping, So one thing I have learned over the years, because having this kind of mother, both really anywhere on the spectrum mother, it's like a training and black belt in boundaries, because if you can master that, if you can figure out your way around it, then you can handle yourself in most other situations. Because one thing you could do is kind of let her do her thing, but then sort of let it roll off your shoulders. Let her talk, but don't take it in. Because sometimes, like, we have to pick our battles. Sometimes confronting things head on may cause a much bigger problem for you than just ignoring it, right? What else? She will triangulate, of course. She will always make herself the good cop, the person who always worries about you, who always wants your best, and like your sister did this or your brother did that, and so again, she will pit people against them. But she's always the one who wants peace, right? She's the one who's inciting the war, but she will come in as a peacemaker. She can't keep secrets. She will talk about everything you've told her to all your friends. Be very careful what you share with a narcissistic mother. She'll invade your space without knocking, just walk in when you're taking a shower, even though you might be 30, 40, 50 years old, she still treats you like you're 7. And one of the worst examples, it's this idealization that's just super syrupy and sweet and feels very inauthentic, is when you're doing your thing and she'll kind of sit back and look at you with these kind of glazed eyes, buttery eyes of love, and be like, you're just so amazing, and you feel like a perpetual child. I don't know if you've ever experienced that. Try to talk about any of this, forget it. She'll always be the victim, she'll tell you all sorts of things like, wait till you have kids, you don't understand, you don't get it, or if you have kids, she'll figure out some other thing to tell you, So this is, again, very confusing kind of a mothering style, because it seems like she's really loving. It seems like she wants your best until you try to break away. And that's when the bondage, your isolation is going to be very apparent. It will turn into war very quickly. It will escalate. She may pull away gifts and conveniences like helping you raise your kid, babysitting, or, not letting you borrow the car, or, anything, whatever you rely upon. She will try to take that away to punish you, basically. And the message of this kind of mother is that if you don't want what I want, because you have to always agree, that means you don't love me. So again, plaguing you with guilt. And so you end up holding yourself back because you lack the confidence of making it on your own, because you were never encouraged to live an independent life. Or it can turn you into an absolute perfectionist. The same with the very severely narcissistic mother who expects so much of you. You will always try to be your hardest and best and more and more and more. And it can actually act as, it can freeze you. It can block your creativity, because you'll feel like no matter what you do, it's never going to be good enough. And if that's where you are, then I actually know quite a bit about this. This is a great juicy topic for me about creative unblocking, because I am an artist myself, and I've worked on this for a long time, and they're great tools you can use. But one of the best things you can do is just really forgive yourself. That's where you want to get to, is forgiving yourself, for feeling this way, and then not expecting perfection of yourself and just doing things for the sake of doing it. It's more like playing and not worrying about that. Like even in these videos, I've noticed sometimes when I would shoot a video and I wanted to make it perfect, not saying for too long, or, and it would just not come across as authentic. Whereas when I make mistakes and, try things just for the sake of wanting to share with you, I feel like that you get my genuine spirit and you get my message that much better. So, if that is worth to you anything, and you've been struggling with trying to create something, but you have been, suffering from perfectionism because you had one of those mothers, just don't worry about it. Just do it. And know that when you show up and you present yourself authentically and talk about what you're feeling, then you will become human and relatable, and it makes you that much more interesting as a person. So coming out of these kinds of parental schematics, patterns, you may find yourself that you do way too much for people because you feel, that's been your training. You're giving to people who don't really even deserve your giving. And you may not really fully realize yet that relationships are meant to be reciprocal, not one-way streets. And this is what this kind of mother is going to teach you, is to always give to her. It's always to pay attention to her, whether it's worshiping or it's pitying her. It's always about her, but it isn't. And this is a very bad form of training. And you're going to need to unlearn that if you want to have a really good, positive relationship with other people, not just with partners, but also with friends, with coworkers, and so on. And when you get there, life just takes on a very different form. So what is the solution to all this? Just real quick, strong boundaries really is, I would say, that's what you're going to have to determine and learn. Sometimes it may mean going completely no contact, and that might be your saving grace. If the mother is extremely undermining, if she is toxic to you, to your children, to your relationships, cut it off. If there is some material you can work with, you might want to go low contact and move away just to kind of reconnect with yourself and have the space to be on your own. You can be amazed actually what happens when you do that. It can feel like such a fearful, scary thing to break away and be on your own, but it's almost like something magical then takes over, and the universe responds and shows up, and you learn everything you need to learn. And then you can come back from that much stronger, more developed place and create the relationship you really want. Because listen, I get it. This is the first relationship we have, right, in human form with the mother. We grow inside of her body. I mean, nothing gets more intimate than that. So it can feel very, very difficult to break these relationships or to completely walk away. It can be very painful. So what I want to say here is that you don't have to go that far, or you can for a period of time, but no, you may be able to, and this is again for you to determine, you may be able to create something that is more on your own terms when you feel like there is enough of sustenance for you to know that somebody is there and cares for you. but you don't rely on it fully, if that makes sense. Because ultimately the healing from a relationship like this has to come from within through inner child work, through inner child healing. You need to, as the adult, need to meet your inner boy or your inner girl and show up there for him and for her and make her feel secure. Let her know that you're always going to be there for her. So you have to become your own parent in a sense. And that's where the healing really comes from. Because a healthy relationship between a parent and a child, especially a mother and a child, it has to, well, actually with both, it has to come from respect and giving you the space. And fathers are much, much better at giving boys the space, I think in general, but not always. It can too be enmeshing. It can too be very, militaristic, authoritative, suffocating. But there has to be space and respect for different opinion. There has to be, the child needs to feel like they can be fully themselves and develop to whatever seed that they were, so they can become the tree, that they were meant to become, the person that they were meant to become. So a good, healthy parent will support that independence and that separation without guilt. So again, I'm going to wrap up here. Hopefully this was a good video for you. I tried to cover pretty broad spectrum here, lots of information. This could have been easily a 2-hour video, but I wanted to make it, just pack it with info for you. If you have any stories, questions you'd like to share, please write them down below. Again, love when people start showing up for each other in the comment section and helping one another, supporting each other. That's always very, very welcome here on this forum, on this channel. And if you need personal support, you can find me through my website on mysoulgps.org. I'm available for personal consultations. I am unable to, I need to quickly state that I get lots of letters and emails from you. Listen, I thank you for sharing your stories, and you can continue doing so, but just know that I'm not able to respond to all of them, to hardly any of them really at this point. I mostly take clients through pre-booked sessions. So you need to either go down the email route or the live Skype session route. So I wish I could help all of you, which is why I'm making these videos. They're free, they're for everyone to get to. But if you need something more that's more personal, more validating, especially to you, specifically to you, then you're going to have to engage with me that way. All right. So anyway, I'm sending you guys lots of love, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.